I'm Jim, and welcome to the weekly message from Hummelstown United Church of Christ, right here in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. We're the small church with a big heart, a place where everyone is truly welcome and where all can belong. Whether this is your first time joining us or you're a familiar part of our family, we're glad you're here. To learn more about our community, visit us online at hummelstownucc.org. Now, let's open our hearts and prepare for today's message.
I do love a good mountaintop story. That feeling of success and completion that comes when you know you've hit the highest hill. That the road doesn't rise anymore ahead of you. There's a very finiteness about that kind of place. And maybe that finitude might be a big reason that these moments we have preserved are so enchanting too. Last year we played around with the idea of light as the teller of this story when we heard of Jesus' transfiguration. And that certainly caught me again this year. That Jesus' clothes are described as bright as light. Face shining like the sun. If you know your color spectrums, you know that pigments, paints, black is the addition of all, white the absence of all. But in the light color spectrum, black is the absence and white is the inclusion of all. So when you see a bright light, that is one that encompasses the entire rainbow of color, that takes into account the absences and collects it all. This is as bright as light. As Jesus appears here to his treasured disciples, those who would never turn their backs on him or question his mission to the world, or not. But let's come back to that, shall we? Moses. Now that's a guy, right? He gets it right. Moses on that mountain with Jesus is a trigger word for the community that heard and passed these stories around themselves as the church was born from Jesus' ministry to be formed. Because Moses on that mountain means Moses on his mountain, one that we heard just a small piece of here this morning, and Elijah on his mountain experience. You might not have as much knowledge of that, so hear this reading from 1 Kings. God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it would split mountains and breaking rocks into pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. Or what another version translates as a still, small voice. Words the UCC continues to use. And then Jesus stands on his mountain with his disciples, his traveling buddies, but also the coming generation of believers and storytellers, and God reminds them of Moses and the covenant and Elijah and the still small voice, that God is among all of the earthquakes and fires and winds and breaking of stones, but God is not just those things. God is more than the one who calls you up on the mountain and gives you a job, a prophetic life to lead, more than just a story to tell. God says, witness this life. Not with perfect ritual or perfect people, but with an awareness that your presence matters and that the work is beloved. The worker is named good. We could say that in that experience, whatever we came from didn't matter anymore because we were transformed. But that's not entirely true. Who Jesus took into that moment of glory and growth? The most inconsistent disciple possible. Matthew 16, verses 15 and 16, Jesus asked, But who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Same chapter, one conversation later, verse 22. Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, you're a hindrance to me." This is the guy that he brings with him to see this otherworldly experience, to see a transformation, not just of his mind, but his physical body, his clothes, his demeanor. The one who can't figure out how to commit or just doesn't seem to trust the judgment of the Son of the living God. But I guess that's another thing about mountaintop experiences. They aren't just for the main character. Mountaintops are places where God and humanity mingle, where emotions and actions get mixed up. In none of these mountaintop moments is there a finality of place of settling. Though Peter does try, but it isn't to be. This kind of mountaintop moment is one to be understood as part of the journey, a flash of brilliance among the rest of the miraculous and mundane. In Exodus, the mountaintop of Moses is certainly not an end. It's the start of a very long time of confusion. Do you know what happens right before Moses goes into that cloud of God's direct presence? Moses and Aaron, Nahab and Abihu, and 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under God's feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli, as bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God and they ate and drank. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandments I've written for their instruction." They saw God on streets made of bright blue stone. They were given food and drink by the Divine One. But when Moses goes into that cloud for 40 days and 40 nights and gets those tablets of the covenant, which granted takes up 8 chapters of Exodus, they go back and make that famous golden calf. They saw God. They saw streets of blue lapis lazuli. They were given respect and honor, and their human survival was assured. And they went to make a calf. This week in Bible study, we took a bit of a deep dive into the mountains of the Gospel of Matthew. The times the same word is used. When Jesus is surrounded by crowds in chapter 5, and so goes to sit on the mountain and begins to preach. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are, blessed are, blessed are, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And on to you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on a lampstand, and it gives light to the hall of the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Creator in heaven." The next mountain comes along. When he's sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will this be, and what will be the sign of your coming?" And his last mountaintop is when the 11 head to the mountain he told them about before his death, and Jesus meets them there and says, "Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. Remember, I am with you always to the end of the age." What we can say about mountaintops is that they are places of change. They are places to come, to pause, to find purpose, but it doesn't necessarily change us unless we want it to change us. Moses, the wandering Israelites, the impatient priests, Elijah, and the disciples all have astonishing experiences. And certainly it seems like they should have been changed by them, but it seems that really the change comes much later. It isn't the impossible becoming possible that turns over their journey, because they all fail after they succeeded here. But in the moment of transfiguration, in any moment when we come face to face with divine spirit, we place a marker on our journey. The ancient stories in Genesis mark important moments with altars, piles of rocks left behind for others to note something significant happened here, but also to remind themselves when we return that way that something significant happened here. So maybe that's what God is doing in Jesus, but in a non-altar building, rock piling way for Peter and James and John, providing a touch point for their faith, a place to mark this. This is where I heard God's still, small voice. This is where the earthquake of reality broke open my worldview. This is where the flames of passion in those around me burned a path for me to follow. The end is not now, but the story is not just beginning. This is that middle stretch of the life of faith. Important in its own way because there is a path of discipleship that's calling you to move with it. Where you are being called into the world today. What it is that is upon your heart that needs to be thrown into the brightest, most inclusive light you can imagine. So put it into God's hands so that you can be amazed by what might become of it. God is more than the one who calls you up to the mountain. God calls you to witness this life. And God calls that life beloved.